Hi, everybody. Welcome to Beyond Surface. I'm Mindy Tousley. I'm the Archives Executive Director. Hope I can remember who I am tonight. Thanks very much. It's been a long day, but welcome to Beyond Surface. Our guest artists tonight from the exhibition Beyond Surface are Kathy Skerritt and Denise Buckley. And before we get started, I would like to thank our funders: the Bernice and David E. Davis Art Foundation, the Cleveland Foundation, the Gunn Foundation, the Zufall Foundation, Ohio Arts Council, and the people of Cuyahoga County from Cuyahoga Arts and Culture. I'd like to introduce my staff and give a big thank you to Megan Elves, our Manager of Marketing and Programming, and Kelly Pontoni, our Collections Registrar. They're acting as co-hosts tonight. They're going to help us out. And Megan is going to just take a few minutes and give you a heads up on housekeeping. We are doing things slightly different tonight, so we want her to explain that to the Zoom audience.
Hi guys, so you are all very familiar with Zoom at this point. It feels like our whole world is on Zoom, but we're going to spice things up a little bit tonight. So I'm going to explain just some basic functionality if you haven't been on a webinar before, and then also how we're going to run the Q&A tonight. So first up, there is a chat function at the bottom of your screen. It could be in a slightly different location just depending on what kind of operating system you're working with. Now, in that chat function, you can have a couple of options in your drop-down menu. You can either do all panelists and attendees or all panelists. All panelists is us. All panelists and attendees means that everybody who's part of the webinar can see what you're saying. We usually ask people to be a little sparing with the chat. It's sort of like a classroom just a little bit. So that's aware. And then also Q&A, that's going to be the exciting part tonight. So what we're going to do is a live version of a Q&A. So we're going to have Ms. Kathy present and Ms. Buckley, and while they're speaking, feel free to raise your hand. You're actually able to do that over on the side. And when you do that, when the artist is done speaking, we'll go ahead and call on you. You'll be able to ask your question out loud. We'll be able to hear you, but not see you. So don't worry if you're in your bunny slippers or your pajamas, doesn't matter. If you feel more comfortable actually typing the questions, you can use the Q&A function. That's going to be two little chat bubbles at the bottom. Go ahead and preface the question with the artist you'd like to ask, so we know who we're asking the question to, and then we'll round them up at the end, and we'll do that. Outside of that, we should have the view controlled and everything else, but if you have any questions throughout the webinar or any problems, go ahead and pop that in the chat, and we'll take care of it. Outside of that, thank you so much for coming tonight, and I'll throw it back over to Mindy Tousley.
Thanks, Megan. So I'm going to go back and share my screen again, and just going to give everybody a little bit of an overview of this beautiful exhibition. It did open in our gallery space today, and our gallery is open from Wednesday through Saturday, Wednesday through Friday from 10 to 4, Saturday from 12 to 4. So I know everybody who's watching tonight is going to run in and see this show tomorrow. I want to give you a preview, but I'm not going to show you everything because I really want you to come into the gallery and see it. So here we go. We'll start again. Okay, I'm just going to collapse the ribbon on the right. Okay, so on the left, I have Kathy Skerritt's Humming 2 from 2006. It's the same piece that was on the postcard. And on the right are two pieces of Denise's, Yang Yang and Sumo. And Yang Yang was on the postcard also. So, you know, the question is always why did we put these two artists together? These, both Kathy and Denise are newly archived artists. I believe they both joined the collection of the archives just a few years ago. And, you know, sometimes we do two-person shows as inaugural shows. Sometimes we do one-person shows. I just really wanted to put their work together. And I thought by showing you these two images together so you can see how the sculpture and the paintings interact, it's sort of obvious why we put them together. But we'll explore a little bit more of why they work together, not just visually, but also philosophically in their approach and also in terms of subject matter. And here is a little overview of part of the show. You can see some wonderful deer by Denise Buckley in the foreground, and in the background are some of Kathy's paintings and another sculpture by Denise. And I apologize for the little bit of fuzziness in this photograph. I find that I'm getting a little shaky as I get older. This is another view down the gallery so that you can see the whole herd of deer. It's called Oh My Deers. They are almost life-size or life-size, and they are welded steel with wax and caustic. And there's a whole herd of them, and they're really quite lovely. And that's the view from the other side, looking down to the end of the gallery to see Kathy's two paintings, the grid biology paintings. So both of these artists have a shared love for the visceral qualities of their chosen mediums, a love of the materials and the manipulation of the materials. The surfaces and the work in the show really demand your attention. And it's very important that you pay attention to them. But again, you know, the show is called Beyond Surface. So there are other qualities too that hold their work together. I don't know how much Denise is going to talk about the deer, but when she describes them in her artist statement, she talks about the need to capture their essence rather than trying to make them look perfectly like deer. And this is really the nature of gesture drawing for an artist. And it's really what she's done, except she's doing it in steel, which is not something that we think of as a material that has any delicacy or grace to it. And yet she's managed to make these deer graceful and delicate, just like real deer. You will notice in this close-up that the surface of the deer have been coated with encaustic, which gives them just a little bit of color. And again, the color is beautiful and delicate. And in the background behind her are two drawings of Kathy's. And the colors in the deer really pick up the colors in the drawings. The drawings are called She Who Knows and Dark Rose. And then two more of Denise's sculptures to the right of that. I think you can see things really work really well in this show together. So the human body is a source of inspiration for both Denise and Kathy. And this is a piece of Denise's Balaza. It's quite large. It's probably about 3 feet tall, I think, and rather heavy. It is cast bronze. Denise's human forms are really all about the gesture, the motion. You can see, I call them explosions, these explosions that are breaking the surface into positive and negative space, show the inner structures in a really visceral way. She's literally breaking the barrier between the interior and the exterior with these forms. And this is another view of her piece. And in the background, you can see Kathy's, and Kathy, if I'm not pronouncing this correctly, you can correct me later. It's Mahasamadhi. And that piece looks like it's breaking away from the surface of the canvas. So, and if you're interested in what Mahasamadhi means, you can ask Kathy, I think, when she's talking. So this is another example of how Kathy uses the body. In the case of her paintings, it's the inner workings of the body as well as the landscape, geologic formations. The landscape is seen from an aerial view, tributaries, waterways, man-made roadways, highways look like, work like, circulatory and the respiratory systems of our bodies. So in this example, the work on the left takes inspiration really from the inner workings of the body. But what this piece actually is a painting, is a byproduct of the process that she has developed over years, which I have never seen another artist use. It involves tempera paint, but her surfaces are absolutely amazing. They exploit the chemical reactions of the paint on a molecular level. And so what you're really seeing is something that looks like a cell that would be similar to a cell in our bodies or in a plant. So again, she's exposing the inner workings biologically of what could happen in your body. The piece on the right, I think, is a little bit more of a geologic kind of formation. The paint on the surface is acting almost like an oil spot. And so again, you know, just like Denise is, she's exposing the inner workings, biologic or geologic, and she's doing it in a way that is the opposite of a painting that is contrived. And by contrived, I mean a painting that is a copy of reality. These are kind of a different kind of reality, and they're happening very naturally because of the process. This is a close-up of one of her paintings. This one is called Detail Light Force Descending 2. You know, the other thing that I'm talking about when I talk about contrivance is in Kathy's work, the artist's ego is kind of absent. These things really look like natural formations. There's an absence of the need to copy something artificially. She's creating these things which are very natural. So this one is Watershed, the Earth is a Realm. And as you can see, this one is an environmental reference, definitely geologic based. It looks like drought. It looks like a dried clay basin. It's kind of amazing. This is a close-up of the surface, so you can see it really close. And these things are quite large too, these paintings. They're like 3 feet by 3 feet. And I'm just going to show you one final painting of Kathy's. We'll end on hers. And this one, the cell is the land, is the creature, is the shape. And I'm ending with this one because the title is really perfect for that kind of ambiguous yet specific reference to the physical and spiritual connections between us, between the earth, and between other living things. That's at the basis, I think, of both of these artists' work. It's the inner and the outer. It's beyond the surface. Oops. Oh, there we go. Stop the ship. Okay, so I'd like to introduce the artists themselves so they can talk to you and tell you a little bit about your work. You can raise your hand, you can ask your questions. I hope since we have fewer artists tonight, we can be a little bit more interactive. So you're not just all nameless faces out there in the internet. So Kathy Skerritt, my good friend, I've known Kathy for several years. Kathy was educated at Carnegie Mellon University, and I believe she has a degree from Case Western too. And so she's been a painter for a long time. She's an amazing woman. She is also an excellent writer, and I think she's going to share some of her writing with you tonight. So Kathy, welcome to Zoom. I am so pleased to show your work, and I'm so pleased that you are an archived artist.
Thank you, Mindy. Thank you. And hello, everybody. And thank you for taking time from precious evenings to join us. I'm delighted to be able to share some of this work with you and to talk a little bit about the methodology behind it, because that's usually what I'm asked about, is how are these surfaces obtained, and what are the motives behind that work. And I thought that it might be best for me to share with you a bit of writing about it, because I find that while I can speak pretty coherently about it when I'm in certain situations, when I can't see my audience, I'd really like to be able to be very, very clear and focused. And so anyway, I've written something here I'm going to read, and then just would be very happy to discuss and take questions and hear your comments. In recent months, I spent days in the studio examining years of my work, especially the jewel-toned, paint-encrusted surfaces that were formed the way a potter forms clay, by building, scraping, and cutting the material in response to the imperative of the internal form that is being called forth. The physicality of the paintings, the effort it takes to make them, as well as their textural force, is the result of an instinctual urge to dig and shape and find the roots of unseen but intuited worlds. I'm always looking for whatever is beneath, behind, and beyond the seen worlds that animates form into existence. Near Cleveland, Ohio, the city where I grew up, there is an amusement park, a place of carnival rides, beaches on the lake, and simple games. I remember a man who made spin art. He put a cardboard on a plate and turned on a switch to make it revolve. And then he asked, what color? My answer was purple, then red. He squeezed plastic bottles of pigment from above the spinning plate, color by color. The pigment hit the plate and spun out in all directions, leaving stretched fields of hue. Each color would do the same, but maybe blend with the first in some spots or hold to its rainbow integrity in others. I never liked the finished piece as much as the watching of the happening of it, with color being the initial attractor and the moments of change the ultimate pleasure. When I was 5 years old, my father and I went to visit my great Aunt Alice in Painesville, Ohio. Her front window dangled a prism that rotated ever so slowly in the light. It washed the room with beautiful rainbow fragments. These colors were like water to me. I could feel my eyes thirst for them. The motion of that daybreak of light spreading out across the room was mysterious and wonderful. I noticed how the colors moved across furniture and into corners, but were never swallowed by the shadows. They always appeared on the other side of the crevice between the pillow and the couch. The refracted white light moved across objects as though everything were flat and had no thingness at all. That was a marvel. I could not fathom how an object could be and not be at the same time. This early wonder in response to light-spawned color is the origin of my working presumption that the surface of the painting is to color as the prism is to light. It refracts light as color to the eye and entices the viewer to come closer by entraining with her intrinsic recognition of what is beautiful or mysterious. When I was young and noticing in these ways, I would sometimes spontaneously enter a state of daydreaming. People would wave their hands in front of my face to get me to snap out of it as though something were wrong. Every time they did this, I experienced a bodily stress, a kind of startle reflex in the gut, followed by sadness or fatigue. As a young adult learning about the great traditions of human spiritual seeking, I came to understand the state to have been spontaneous contemplation. It was without mental activity, but fully conscious. It was immersion in a boundaryless feeling space of being. And because there was no perceptual limitation placed on it by mental activity, it was highly restful. And I found that in my case, painting is the practice that most often replicates this state of restful contemplation and allows entry into that boundaryless feeling space. In this state, there is no ultimate object occupying my mind, even though I often begin a painting with a clear intention. Rather, it is a streaming with the unfolding process of discovery, and it begins with close attending to changes in the state of the materials with which I work and in the relationships among and between the emerging images' forms, including relating to color and texture as the progenitors of form. And there are no expectations imposed on what these forms should be or what should be happening. It is participation in the process of the emergence of forms in a kind of call and response in which planned action evokes spontaneous emergence, evokes unplanned action, evokes insight, and further responding to the image as it arises. In practical terms, my techniques evolved from pushing materials beyond the limits of the applications for which they were designed. For instance, when painting, I look for unconventional results when I thickly apply paint that is not designed to be used that way. I see what happens when it dries and what it does in relationship with other materials. Does it crack, mix, resist? Where does the breakdown or resistance occur? When does it occur? Then I step back from the edge of breakdown and I play with the materials in various ways until I can replicate the found quality on different surfaces and at different scales. Time is a consciously manipulated tool in this process. Sitting with a poured painting surface or revisiting it over days, I notice there are moments when the surface has a thin membrane on it, but the paint remains viscous underneath. I poke it. I cannot resist sticking it with wires or utensils and stretching that surface membrane. I poke it again and open it up. I know it will heal over like a wound in skin. Then when the water gets pulled out into the surrounding dry air, this particular paint's natural tendencies will be magnified. Large cracks will appear along the lines I drew into the surface membrane and viscous underlayers. In this way, the essential qualities and characteristics of a design begin to emerge and guide the next steps. For example, One day I notice that a dried canvas has paint that chipped off. I am annoyed that the integrity of the painting is compromised, but I see the paint chip left a footprint, a colored mark staining the canvas. I chip off more pieces and see a fantastic spotted pattern emerge. With a potter's knife, I scrape every inch of a 5-foot by 4-foot canvas clean of paint. And from that day on, I intentionally accrete paint in order to carve it off. I design for the unseen footprints that will be left behind by how the specific colors act and how my drawing into the drying surfaces will create newness. This inquiry into the accidental is my root practice for developing methods that are replicatable. It has led to being able to duplicate these surface qualities that seem purely accidental up and down scale. The same so-called accidents can be obtained on a 2-inch square canvas as on a 5-foot square canvas. The images in my paintings, whether specific forms such as orbs or more abstract atmospheres, are a kind of alchemical construction of multiple layers that reveal patterns that may simultaneously appear biologic, geologic, atmospheric, or metallic. This simultaneity of patterns is intended to collapse the perceptual space between the viewer as the subject and the painting as object by not constraining the image to a single point of view as to what it is or what it means. When there are multiple possible meanings, as in, for example, the surface appearing simultaneously as metal, liquid, or stone, point of view is loosened and the possibility of sensing into the boundaryless feeling space is opened up because mind is no longer fixed in one possibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Well, anybody have any questions for Kathy? I don't
Go
think
ahead and
anybody
raise your
raised their
hands if you do, and we will go ahead and call on you. I do see one in the queue. Oh, I see one from Emily. Let me go ahead and Emily, you should be allowed to talk. Can we hear you? Go ahead and unmute yourself.
So I wonder, do you ever have individuals come to watch you performing this miraculous opportunity that you've just shared with us, what you do? I have a sparkle in my eye, and I just enjoyed listening to you so much as you described your process and I think some of your philosophy, and it was just wonderful to listen to you.
Thank you. It's interesting. I'm a very kind of a shy painter in the sense of being, having my studio open as I'm working and having people come. And I think, although I have been open to that over the years, the thing for me, Emily, is the painting process takes such a long time in many instances. Like nothing happens for long periods of time. Canvas gets poured and it might be 2 days, it might be 10, it might be 2 weeks before it's somewhere where I'll do my little poking through the surface membrane. And then I'll do that. And then that's it for the next period of time. So it's almost like I probably need to do a time-lapse photography sort of rendering of it. And I've always felt that because of the way that process unfolds, I don't have enough to offer, if you will, to someone who's coming to be there and who wants to partake of that process, be part of that. So, but I'm always open to how that might happen, and yeah, I think that's what I can say about it. Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed your talking about your process, and I find it quite intriguing. You're a very intelligent person, and I have a great deal of respect for your artistic talent. So thank you
Very much. Thank you.
And the next one we have up is from Alan Christensen. Let me allow Alan to talk. Go ahead and going to ask you to unmute yourself, Alan, and you are up.
First of all, hi, Kathy. How are you?
Hi, Alan. Yeah, I'm great. It's good to hear you.
Really, I'm going to get my screen here so you can see me. I don't know if you can see me or not.
It's just audio for
audio. Okay, cool. anyway, I have been fortunate enough to watch Kathy's process throughout some of her pieces back in, I think, what is it, 2008, Kathy?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yep.
Yeah, I used to own a gallery in Tremont a long time ago, and we did a big show for Kathy, and I kept going by her studio and seeing the process. So it's really interesting, and she's right. It's not something you can just sit there and just watch all at once and get the full effect of it. It's a process. I mean, she has so many things going on at the same time and working so many pieces. But yeah, I'm just excited to see you, Kathy. I'm glad you're doing well. You know, I've been following you on Facebook over the last few years, and it's just good to see your smiling face and seeing that you're creating.
Thank you, Alan. It's great to hear you.
Yes.
Next up, I have one from Melissa. So I'm going to go ahead and read Alan. And we have Melissa Harris. And in a second, I'm going to, there we go, asked to unmute. Try one more time, Melissa. She's working on unmuting right now.
Yes.
Okay.
This
There we go.
question is Kathy. Can she
Hi,
hear me?
Melissa. Hi. Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, Kathy. It's Melissa Harris.
Yeah.
I really admire your work. It's amazing. Just gonna get that out there. But I wanted to say, I was asking, and my question was, from the time you were a child and you daydreamed to the time that you are now and you're developing your medium and working in your work, is there a spiritual connection that goes back and forth? Or how does that drive for you? I guess as an artist myself, I find myself either doing emotional gestural work or representational paintings, but I'm curious as to how your spiritual connection from the time you are where you are now to you were as a child, how that whole drive goes forward for you and where the connections make happen for you. How does that happen for you?
I'll give a couple of just brief examples of sort of like inflection points along the way. I was really fortunate to have a family that loved to travel and father who put together these outrageously wonderful trips when I was growing up, you know, for the summer vacations. And from a very young age, I spent a lot of time on airplanes and on trains and on boats. And I spent a lot of time looking at where I was and what was around me, looking down at the planet and looking down into the water and looking up at temples and looking, you know, at just this whole incredibly rich world that we live in. And I began to notice as we were flying over Africa and I'm looking down, and I remember distinctly looking down and thinking, the desert doesn't stop at some line, you know, it becomes something else. And I could see the becoming of the desert, you know, becoming something else, becoming the river delta, becoming the sea, becoming the next piece of land. And I had this sense that there was no place that was all to itself, that, and you know, it was everything was connected. And I started noticing this patterning that the inside of the body, some of you might have seen that movie in school. We saw it in middle school a lot. It's called, I think, The Powers of 10.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes.
that's like a real big influence in my life. The Powers of 10. I just amazed. Like you'd go way out into outer space and you see the Earth was, you know, 10 million miles away, and then the camera comes back in and ends in, you know, above this guy's body, and then it goes into the guy's body, and you start seeing the same patterns inside the body as you saw it in space. And I was seeing that as I looked down on the planet as we traveled and so on. And that messed me up for most organized religion for a really long time, because I started to see people the same way. I started to see that there were holy people in every land, and there could be no single point of view about the divine that could be the total truth about that. And that shaped everything from that point, like from the age of 13 onward. And I won't go any further into it, but just to say that, you know, there were moments like that along the way that very, very distinctly shaped the way I approach noticing the accidental and bringing that forward into method. So
Thank you.
thank you, Melissa.
And that is all of our raised hands at this point in time. So the questions in the Q&A that you typed in, we'll get to at the end. But I'm going to throw it back to Mindy to introduce our next artist. And yes, if you have any more questions you think of for Kathy, pop it in the Q&A. We'll take care of it later. Thanks so much.
Okay, thanks very much. Denise, you're unmuted. Good. So next up, we've got Denise Buckley, our next artist, the other half of the show. I'll just mention, I don't know if Denise wants to talk about her background as an artist too much. I didn't really do that so much with Kathy, but I will mention that she has taught at Hawkins School for exactly the same amount of years that the Archives has been a nonprofit, which I thought was pretty amazing. That's a nice coincidence. And she's the chair for the visual arts there. And just a little fun fact also, in case you want to ask her about that, her work has been featured in different movies: Spider-Man 2 and 3, Bringing Down the House, and a 20th Century Fox television show. Very unusual. She also had a Fulbright Award to travel in Japan. And I think another sort of overlap between Denise and Kathy is the need and the ability and the want to go out and travel and see the world too. So Denise, I don't know what you're going to talk about, but I'm really excited to hear you. People can ask you questions, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being on tonight.
Thank you. And thank you for having me in the show. It's wonderful. I can hardly wait to see it in person. So I have always thought of myself as a sculptor since I was a little child. And when I was 7 and in the 7th grade, my teacher told my mother that I needed to have art lessons. And my mother, bless her soul, did whatever the teacher said. And they drove me from where I grew up in Brockton, Massachusetts, to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts every Saturday from the time I was 7 until I could drive. So I feel that I grew up at the Boston Museum of Fine Arts, and I was mentored by Ralph Rosenthal, who, when I was no longer able to be a student because I was too old, asked me to be his teaching assistant, and thus began my teaching career. So I consider myself an artist and a teacher. And if I couldn't be a full-time artist and earn a living, I love teaching. The kids inspire me. I learn something from them every day. I love the banter. And most importantly, we laugh together every day. And so it is a joy to go to work. And I do enjoy that. When I went to Massachusetts College of Art, I fell in love with bronze casting. And I will say that is my favorite medium to work in. I love modeling, and then I love the plaster of the mold making, the wax, the investing, and I especially love pouring the molten bronze. It is exciting and scary all at the same time. I just love the fire and flames. I've been burnt a couple times, but nothing too badly, so it's worth continuing to do. And when we lost, a group of us lost the use of a foundry, then you had to do something else. And a friend showed me how to weld. And I started combining the bronze heads that I had made with welded bodies, and then started just making welded pieces because I can do that by myself and I don't need help. And we were about to do bronze casting this summer when the pandemic hit. And I couldn't do that. And so I decided that the deer in my yard ate all of the vegetation that I planted, that they would become my inspiration instead of my enemy. And I've spent the last 6 months welding these deer. And the goal was that they were lines in space and that I was really drawing with the steel. And I hope that comes across. And so my goal is to cast bronze this summer if the pandemic lifts, and that's all I have to say.
Okay. Any questions for Denise?
So go ahead and raise your hand if you have a question for Denise. She can respond to it live, or even just, question point there. I got one for Larry and Susan. So let me go ahead and start with Larry. And let's just have a second.
All right, Denise, what
Sure.
is the largest casting that you've done so far?
So the largest one I have is about 5 feet, and it was cast in 5 parts and welded together.
Okay, is that here locally in the Cleveland area
Yeah,
or
it's
somewhere else?
my studio at my house,
And where's that?
Richmond Heights.
Okay, so of course we can just go in your backyard and just fiddle around there, correct?
Yeah, basically.
Can I bring the dogs? Very good. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Larry. Next up, I got Susan Squires. And then I'm asking you to unmute right now, Susan. Okay, you are up.
There I go. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Susan. Nice to hear your voice.
Good to see you. I'm wondering about the encaustic. Is this the first time you've used it? And tell me a little bit about what prompted you to do that.
You know, remember you and Ann and I took that course several
at
years
R&M.
ago?
That's
Okay,
why I
so
loved it.
I have used it a lot on the clay
Oh, okay.
pieces because it's absorbed into the clay. And only recently I've started putting it on steel, and I put it on a steel piece that's in my yard, and it's been out there for 2 years. So through the hot summer and the winter, and the wax didn't fall off. And I
Oh, wow.
decided that would be, I was willing to try it on the deer. So I put the encaustic on the deer.
I love it. I can hardly wait to see him in person. Thanks,
Thank
Denise.
you.
Awesome. Up next is going to be Charlotte Lees. Actually, Charlotte is another sculptress and an archived artist, and we are so happy to have you on the call. So, there we go. Charlotte, you're up.
Oh, Denise, it is so good to see you.
I wish
And
I could see you, Charlotte.
I know it. I'm glad you can't see me because, but anyhow, I love the deer, and I think everyone needs to see both of these artists in the flesh to come and look at those pieces. Kathy's are also quite dimensional. And Denise, I really like your combination of the heads with the welded steel cylindrical bodies. I think they're so powerful. I can't wait to see what your castings are going to be like this summer. I'm going to have to stop over when you start doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but you know, it's great to see you. And how much longer are you going to be teaching? Because you need to spend more time in the studio.
I know. I am within a 3-year window, Charlotte, because it's time for me to be a full-time artist.
I think so. You've been dying to do that since you've got your house and you've decided to stay in Cleveland, which we are so fortunate that you're here.
Thank you, Charlotte.
All right. Take care and be safe. We only have a few more months to go.
I know.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, Charlotte. All right, I think Emily has a question as well for Denise. Got that. Let's see. Emily, you are up.
So I have no concept of when you use the word casting. And I wondered if you could give a brief description of that process, please.
I certainly can. So what I usually do is I love modeling and so I usually make whatever I want out of clay. And then I take a plaster mold off of it. And then in the plaster mold, I paint in the wax to a thickness, you know, should be a 1/4 inch. I tend to be thicker and maybe a 1/2 inch. Then you'd use kind of, it's called a gating system, but it's rings of wax that goes around to the piece that you've made. You then mix up sand and plaster in a liquid form, and you surround the inside and the outside in a plaster silica sand mold. It hardens, so all you have is like a cup at the top. You put it in a kiln, you melt the wax out, and you have what you had in the negative, and then you have a furnace, and you put the bronze in a crucible in the furnace, raise it up to 2200 degrees Fahrenheit, and then you pour the molten bronze in, take all of that gating off, sand, file, millions of hours to get it to look like what it did in the wax. Did I explain that well enough?
You did. I can understand the concept as you described it. For example, with the piece that Mindy showed us of the woman, the figure.
Mm-hmm.
But I still don't understand how, using that process, you made the deer. Do you
So
shape?
No, the
make
deer
this-
are welded steel. So the deer are steel rods that I welded together. That's all steel. It's a totally different process.
Okay. How did you decide what form that deer would take? They're really
Well,
elegant.
That's what took so long in the 6 months, was figuring out how to form each of the bodies. So I have equipment to bend the steel. So I bend the steel, I cut the steel, I weld it together. If it doesn't work, I cut it apart and I weld more on until I get it the shape that I want. It's a reverse thinking of the clay. I love clay because you build it off, you take it off. When I'm doing the steel, I have to almost know what I'm going to do first because it's so much harder to pull it apart and make it happen. It's a much more conscious of putting pieces together than just modeling and taking it apart.
Have you ever created any YouTube videos on the
No,
work
I
that
have
you
not.
do?
No.
Are you familiar with anyone who has? I think I'm going to do a little more research on my own on
Mhm.
both your processes, and I just wondered. I'll do some Googling on Google. But thank you for explaining the two different
Okay,
processes that
thank
you
you.
used.
So I have some, I believe Wally Kaplan has a question. So I'm gonna see if she, so Wally, you can either type a question in or raise your hand and I'll be able to call on you. But actually I can, if anyone else has any live questions for Denise, go ahead and raise your hand. And if not, I will start kicking into these written questions. And I'll have one more live question to ask Kathy as well. So getting down, again, Charlotte. Okay, so we did have for Denise, a lot of good ones. So Denise, we want to hear, so I'm trying to find it exactly, but this one is from Tom. Denise, can you talk more about your art that has been used in movies? Names, Denise. We want to hear those names drop. Hit them on the ground.
Okay, so I was lucky enough about 17, 18 years ago when I was in LA to meet an agent who rents artwork to movie sets. And so I left my artwork with her. And then and I don't know if they still do it because she has since left that business. But what used to happen is the set designers would look at these agents' artwork that they had, and then they rented it. So I would be shipping my pieces off to LA and they rented it for like $400. But I got the piece back and I got to have the piece in the movie. So when I would go to the movie, I could point to the artwork and be so excited that it was in a movie. But because I would sign this 10-page contract, because there was no dialogue, I didn't get a byline that said artwork by. If they had pointed to it or talked about it, then my name would have been in the credits. So no credits, but it was very exciting. My students at Hawken at the time thought it was awesome that I was in the movies. And it was a thrill. I still have all those movies and my nieces just used to play them from when my statues were in. They never saw the whole movie. They would clap at each time they showed the statues and that was it. So that was exciting and that has dried up. But now, and ever since, when I go to the movies, I look at the artwork on the walls because I know somebody really did it and it's rented. And that's pretty awesome.
I would have no idea. So that's what the next thing I'm going to do in the movies. I'm just going to look. So it looks like I found a couple of more hands raised. They were hiding a little down in my queue. My apologies. So we're going to hit some of these guys. It's obviously live Q&A. It's so nice to hear people. So I'm going to call on Ralph. And Ralph is allowed to talk right now. Go ahead and unmute yourself, Ralph.
Yes, I just did.
Excellent. Go for it.
Good to see you, Denise. It's
Good to
marvelous.
hear you, Ralph.
Been a while. What are you using to do your welding? I'm curious. You never told me about that.
I'm doing a stick welder because I like the way stick works and it holds together better.
All right. Keep it up. That's
Thank
great stuff.
Easy enough. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move down. I see Wally. Thanks for raising your hand, Wally. Go ahead and unmute yourself and you are up, my dear.
Yeah, hi Denise. I love your work. I remember seeing one of your heads with the molded steel, which I thought was wonderful. I think you had it for one of the auctions at Artist Archives. Unfortunately, I didn't win it, so I was very sad about that. My question was, how do you bend the steel?
So I have this industrial machine and I put the steel in and I crank it and it turns and it makes a perfect circle. And then I cut and bend it with a hole in a steel table.
Thank you. You must be very strong. You have to be very strong to do this?
Yeah,
Arm strength?
and lifting stuff. Next time I'm going to be a paper artist in my next life, so it's not so hard.
Thank you.
Up next, I have Gloria Reed. And go for it, Gloria. You should be able to talk now. Looks like you're on. Go for it, Gloria.
Hi, Pori. My sister-in-law's in New Mexico.
Birthday.
Thank you.
I wish I could be there and see it.
Oh, I wish you could be too.
Yeah.
Well, always been a great support, all of you out there, you know, of the process and my evolution, and I'm very grateful for that.
Okay. Well, you take care.
I will. You
And
too.
I hope I didn't interrupt something important.
Yes. All right.
Okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Thanks, hon. Love you.
It looks like now we are on to our Q&A questions. So I'm going to mix it up and kick it over to Kathy and ask her a couple of questions. Go. We got lots of good ones too. So this is actually for Kathy Skerritt. This is from Stephen Calhoun, a member and an amazing radical reiterated photography. Hopefully I got that right the way I said it. And Stephen's question is there an enlivening paradox or contradiction of critical polarity in your work or intent over the course of your art path?
My thesis. Yes, there's a thesis there, Stephen. Thank you very much. I know Stephen quite well. And I can hardly even begin with that one. In terms of paradox, absolutely. And it is an enlivening paradox. It's a paradox of being, how can I describe it? It's sort of this paradox of being a maker and being, you know, in a process of bringing forth an image, an object, you know, this process of serving this object, this image to come forward. See, this is where words really get difficult for me when I try to stand into this. And at the same time, to realize that there's a certain part of this that is beyond me, is bigger than myself. So it's like I'm present to the process, and yet something's happening that is not about me at all, that in which I am simply a kind of a vessel to receive energies. And it sounds, you know, it's kind of esoteric, or, you know, maybe some might think it's even a little crazy, but there is this matter of being the one who makes and being the one who simply witnesses. And, you know, serves a process that's beyond myself. That is enlivening for me. When that moment clicks in where I realize that there's something beyond my kind of limited point of view that I've spoken about that is actually animating what's going on the canvas. And I am taken out of myself in a sense. That's when the magic happens. And yet then I have to come back on the other side of that. I have to come back to ground, so to speak, and I have to serve all of the practical necessities of being an artist with a studio, or, you know, selling the work or showing the work and all the sorts of things. It's a real madness. That's what I'm trying to say, is this madness between this incredibly transcendental process and just the grounding that has to happen, you know, when that's finished. And yeah, I better stop there because I'm thinking out loud, and I think I'm going to have to work with that one a little bit more. Stephen.
That was a good one, Stephen. Oh, I love it. I like the almost that butting heads between the physicality of having to maintain a studio practice with the actual transcendental process.
Yeah.
And if you kind of think of it, they're completely at odds. So.
It's made me crazy a lot. Yeah.
Well, this one will be this question will be a good insight into processes, and it's from James Stewart, and it's Kathy. Can you tell us about how and when, I like the when, you title your work?
How and when I title the work?
Yeah,
that's
where the process does the title pop up?
Yeah, that can happen in the midst when I start to identify you know, that what it, you know, the what that it is. You know, I'm saying on the one hand, the simultaneity of patterns can, you know, dissolve the idea of that it has a particular meaning. But there is a moment where I kind of fixate, I kind of laser in on it, and I go, oh, that's what it is. It's that. At least it's that for now. Because if you look at the back of a lot of my paintings, the titles have changed over the years. I change them. I just cross them out and put the next title in, you know, 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road. So if there's ever any kind of, you know, cataloging of my work that's done, and, you know, it's crazy because some of these pieces have multiple names, but there is, by and large, it happens after the fact. And when I sit with the work for a while and I kind of inquire of it, you know, what is it I'm supposed to know now? What is it you want me to notice? And sometimes I sit with it a long time, you know, over months before it's clear to me what we can call it now. And yeah.
I love that. And it's, as all of the archives people were nodding, yes, we've seen that in the back of the paintings. What's the title? Yeah, tag making was, yeah, we figured it out. Let me pop it over to Denise, mix it up, make sure we're going to be trying to be respectful of people's time and at 8 o'clock tonight. So if I don't get to your question, you can always send things to info@artistarchives.org. I'll put in the chat and you can send them to Kathy and Denise directly. So this one is going to be for Denise. And first off, everybody's in love with the deer. In love. And it is the hardest thing to be in the gallery and not pet them. I've restrained myself like a good art historian, just so you know, hard. We have a question from Jeannie, and she wants to know, how long does it take? I know the size is different to create one of the deer.
Well, I started this 6 months ago, so it's taken me 6 months to complete all of them, depending on, yeah, the whole group of them. And feel free, I will say this, Mindy, you may touch the deer if you come to the gallery. I'm okay with that.
Oh my gosh, you shouldn't have told me that. Okay, to my boss, Mindy, I promise I will pet the deer.
We've been touching them all week, Denise. I touch them every day. They're very touchable.
So touchable. So if you come to the gallery, you'll look and see how they're touchable. We'll monitor. It'll be good. And I have another one for Denise. Denise, can you tell us about your experience in Japan? And that was
Oh, wow. Well, I had this Fulbright, and it was a teacher Fulbright. And so we were studying the educational system of Japan and comparing it to the United States. But I got to see lots of artwork, and I must tell you, the sumo wrestler, in part, and several others, I was fascinated by sumo wrestling when I was there. And I don't know why, but these gigantic men who were so graceful as they were bumping heads and bowing. And so I did a whole series of sumo wrestlers in bronze and clay and all kinds of things. So that was my take back from Japan. It was a very spiritual experience. The people are lovely and kind and polite, and the artwork everywhere, everything they do is artful and thoughtful. It was just a fabulous experience.
Then this one is going to do. I'm looking through we have really great questions today. Thank you so much, everybody. And then let's do one for Denise, and then I'll ask one that I'm going to say a lovely statement for the both of us. So real quick, if Kathy and Denise wouldn't mind, if you have Instagrams, to type it in the chat. We have a request for that. No Instagrams? Okay, so I do believe, yeah, more additional information on the artist, you can go to artistarchives.org, and I'll put that there. So good old fashioned website way. So this one actually is going to be for Kathy. And then I'll do one to end up that's going to be a statement of gratitude from one of the people. Kathy, it says, do you work on pieces simultaneously? Since the process takes so long, are things occurring at the same time?
Yes, very much so. During the sort of a period of time in the mid 2000s when a lot of the method was really becoming clear and refined. I had one period where I was working on installations of multiple canvases, and and I was doing those in addition to doing large canvases, singular canvases, or doing triptychs and that sort of thing. And I actually had something like 65 actual canvases going in addition to this one installation piece that had 297 12-inch squares in it. And I had this huge studio. Some of you may remember that old red church catty corner from the Art Craft building on Superior. I had the second floor of that space, 7,000 square feet. So I had all of this spread out, and I could move from one big installation piece to the next set of things. I had things on tables, I had things on the floors. And that was the biggest explosion of work. These days, my spaces tend to be a little smaller, and I have worked, though, even in a very small space, I've been able to do installation pieces of very small canvases, 2-inch squares. One piece is actually 1,200 2-inch squares, and I was able to do that in a 500 square foot studio, and I had that going alongside a couple of other larger pieces. And I find that they start then to feed off of each other as well. They may be very distinctive in their final form, but I'm learning from one piece to the next and translating the accidents, across pieces. Yes, I can't just work on one piece because of the time issues. It's like, what do I do now? So I really like working that way. Yeah.
Thank you, Kathy. And I'm going to read a statement by Barbara Martin, and then I'm going to throw it back to Mindy for the ending of the program. This is for Kathy and Denise. And Kathy and Denise, I truly love your work. So beautiful, and I can't wait to see the show. I have to thank you again, Kathy, for being so kind to me when I first landed in Cleveland a year and a half ago. It actually took time to check out my work and thoughtfully introduce me to so many people. I am forever grateful. And I think we're just very grateful to have both of these amazing artists here today. Thank you for your questions and your time. And again, if you have more questions, feel free to email them to info. We'll get them to the artists. So ladies, thank you with all our hearts for being here today.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Denise and Kathy. This is, I really like this format where people are able to talk back and forth. This reminds me a little bit more of a real reception, which is great because we're all really missing that connection. I just want to say a few closing remarks. I will say that there are pieces for sale in the show from both artists. The majority of the work, especially Kathy's work, is from the collection, but there are several pieces for sale and they're very reasonable. And the deer are all for sale as a group, a herd, if you can accommodate a herd in your yard, or separately. And they're just as charming as can be, as well as the sumo man is for sale too. He's amazing. So anyway, so please do come into the archives. If you're not able to come in and you have some inquiries in that direction, you know, just get in contact with us and we'll be able to help you. We'll send you pictures or whatever we need. We do have a program coming up for National Women's History Month in March 10th. We have African-American artist Amelia Amaki, artist, curator, and art historian. Those of you who saw the Seen Unseen show may remember 2 pieces that were part of Carrie Davis's collection that were in that show. So Wednesday, March 10th from 7 to 8 p.m., she is giving us a lecture on 4 African-American women artists that you should know. It's going to be a fantastic lecture. For those of you who are members, our call for entry for the members show is going to be going out soon, and that is going to open up in April. So just to remind you to start thinking about that. We do have the size limitation as usual of 24 inches. And I think that's it. Thanks everybody for coming on tonight. We had a really big group. I think at one point we had 93 people. Kathy, happy birthday. If I'd known it was your birthday, I would have a cake right now and you could, you know, pretend to blow out the candles from across town. But happy birthday. Denise, thanks so much for being on. I hope that you both can get out and see the show. If you do come visit the gallery, we do wear masks. You are required to wear masks. There's sanitizer all over the place. We're cleaning every night and every morning. And rarely is there more than 1 or 2 people in the gallery at once. So you're very safe. So thanks everybody for coming on again. And these Zoom endings are always really awkward. So I'm just gonna, everybody just kind of wave goodnight and we'll sort of fade out as we leave.
Bye everyone. Have a great night.
Okay.